So you said earlier today, as Ken's job is beach, your job is roto. So wanted to know how your job was today because you got to see Roto in the flesh. I did not because new day job. It's a good thing that we retired the Where's Phil clip because I am no longer teaching in San Antonio today. One of the changes that took place. So tell me about your day with Roto.
The second age of Verde All Day begins today. It
Mhm.
was momentous. It was epic. It was like a fantasy film. There were dragons and unicorns about the thing that I find interesting about this is that each time we do one of these, there is this kind of hush in the room as if the soccer pope has arrived. And he's not all that formal. The thing that I appreciate is that he takes this very seriously and he inspires
Mhm.
an atmosphere of there are things more serious in life than football, but when we are dealing with football, we are going to be serious about football.
Mhm.
And yeah, that extends to the way that he is regarded and the way that he regards other people. He makes sure to shake everyone's hand. He establishes that atmosphere of I'm going to be here and I'm going to answer questions and I'm going to not answer questions. And in the way that I not answer the questions, you will hear versions of me answering the questions because I'm a professional. I've been doing this for a long time.
And
Even
there's a
though
certain gravitas too, right?
it's when I say this was more of the same, I don't mean that as an insult. I
Mhm.
mean that one of the things that I appreciate most is getting acclimated to knowing what to expect and knowing that my time is going to be valued, regardless of how verbose my questions may be, which for those interested who think that I should just ask 5 word questions, which I have gotten that very helpful note. And if I tell you thanks for the helpful note, I might not actually mean those words.
Uh,
One of the reasons that I do a little bit of over talking in the questions is to make sure that I get a physical body language recognition that they understood what I was asking
mhm.
rather than go for the easy dismissal and
Mhm.
just look for those cues to make sure that I'm setting us on the course that I think that we are. And that's very much what I
Right.
went into today planning to do after conferring with you and prepping with you. And then also having
Mhm.
a couple things that are people who have gotten to know my interests and particular peccadillos regarding the club that will be no surprise to them that I always throw in some stuff for me. But to your question, yes, my job, Roto is my beach and I think we have good weather on the horizon and an interesting off season to boot. And I feel like
Mhm.
as easy as it would have been to be all about stonewalling, I feel like we got some valuable information. And there were a couple of cases in which he tipped his hand in ways that maybe people didn't anticipate. Maybe he didn't anticipate tipping his hand in the
Mhm.
way that one of the last times we talked to Josh officially, he told us that Leo Väisänen took himself out of selection for the rest of the season in a way that helps the team avoid some insurance charges and things related to the injury report or not
Yeah.
actually being cleared to play, but not playing.
It was also a very Derek Smalls on base. He wrote this sort of moment.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
remember that in Spinal Tap,
Mm,
Puppet Show and Spinal Tap, that scene, Jazz
yeah.
Odyssey.
Oh, I'm well acquainted. That we'll probably have to fill some space in the off season, and I think an episode just all about Spinal Tap and how it applies to soccer. I think that could be in the offing. So as a fair
Yeah,
warning to everybody,
absolutely. We're going to break it down.
yeah, there will be none more Verde and Black.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies and the after emergencies as we are here now, Monday evening. Of course, we had the news which prompted the emergency podcast yesterday, and now Moises has returned from Rotoland. Burrell did his press conference about 2:30 Monday afternoon, and dropped some knowledge, dropped some hints about some things, dropped some big smoke screens about some other things that he wasn't going to talk about. So I guess, yeah, let's just start at the beginning. Let's just go with your first question and where that went. And then I just want to get into maybe some of the bigger 30,000 foot takeaways and then maybe some of the little specifics. I don't know. I didn't have notes going into this. I just,
I've been cobbling together my notes for the write up. I still need to rewatch it. And I mean, being there in person, there's a certain amount that you just get from paying attention, but no matter how good of attention you try to pay, you're also listening and making notes, as I was, about what has already been asked and what I want to try to dig at from a different angle to try to get more of an answer, which is where my final question, which wrapped us up, ended up coming from. Because there were things that he didn't want to talk about a certain way, is the biggest thing that I've picked up on with Burrell. He appreciates preparation. He appreciates candor. He appreciates people not going for the sensationalist angle, which is why I feel like I've built a reasonable professional rapport with him, where as long as I mind my P's and Q's, he's going to do his best to give me some kind of an answer. And I was very eager to get in first, what we like to call the fill position, not the pole position, but fill position, and lead off asking about what beyond the very clear line that he drew, which was playoffs is the expectation, what else contributed to the decision, knowing that it was never as simple as don't make the playoffs and that's the only criteria. And he didn't want to get much more specific than just looking at holistically the whole tenure. Was
and he did jump in right before
he did
when you were asking your question.
He jumped in, I think, intending all along to make an opening statement of appreciation for Josh and the time that he gave to the club and what he meant to the club, and wishing him well, which it's a pleasantry, but it was genuine in that I don't think he wishes ill of Josh. But as I alluded to in the 20-minute thing that we posted yesterday, I feel like there is opportunity for growth, healing, learning on both ends of things. And I think he sincerely does wish Josh the best. The next thing that I asked him was about the nature of the kind of coach he wants. Give us some detail, give us some thoughts on what you're looking for in a head coach. And he similarly demurred, and a couple other folks asked versions of that, again, trying to press him and get him to say something. And he really was pretty reluctant. But going literally all the way to the end, my final question was about the relationship between the coach and the fan base, which other folks had asked pieces of that kind of thing, alluding to, and I guess a bit explicitly, a bit not so explicitly dancing around. Wolf's relationship with the fan base was not the warmest, I think is the most generous way that I could put it. And I asked if, looking at this as a reset opportunity for the sporting side of things, for the fan relations side of things, for the club's identity as a whole, did he see this as an opportunity, citing the post that he wrote that they put on austinfc.com about that energy of the fan base, that summoned energy that those of us who've been in Q2 at those crucial moments have felt, where it's like the energy of the fans in the stadium put out this sort of vibe that elevates everything in the way that, the heightened poetic language of Shakespeare, will take us away in a soliloquy, and things get a bit more poetic, a bit more fantastic, a bit more weird in a good way. And I saw that registered for him. And so he did actually crack the shell of, I'm not saying this is the only thing or it's the most important thing, but that is definitely a criteria that he is looking for, is a coach cognizant of and willing to engage with what is definitely seen as an asset, which he has cited multiple times as one of the reasons that he wanted to take on the sporting direction of this club. Is that is a rare kind of thing when you have a fan base and a community that can summon that kind of thing, not just once as a fluke, but as a recurring thing. So I think that was a very good bridge to what a lot of the fan base really wanted to hear out of today.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because, again, Josh would always talk about the fan base, but it always seemed to be more as in the abstract. Like there was occasional interaction in the away match earlier this year where he drank the beer and then said, see you in the playoffs. No, but it never seemed to really be easy for him or necessarily second nature for him to the way that like a Vanni Sartini might be, right?
Yeah.
So where you have somebody who is wearing shirts for various supporters and is really somebody who is cognizant, just natural with that relationship. That just never seemed to be anything that Josh was naturally able to do.
I've mentioned this to you privately, and it's not
Mhm.
something I ever addressed with Josh, but in my pre-Roto is Life existence covering the team, one of those games in 2022, you may recall, Musa Jite scored a hat trick, and
Yeah.
the stadium has never been as electric as it was that night. And it was a
Mhm.
rare instance where Josh actually came over to the stands. And we now know that family and friends of members of the club tend to hang out in 108. I was in 108.
Yeah.
I was wearing my cut, my patches and pins laden denim vest with roll down sleeves, covered in fabric paint and patches and all kinds of stuff. And he was saying hi, not just to people that he knew, but just people who were there, took some selfies, signed a couple autographs. And he did this thing where, Phil, when somebody sees you and you can see that they're trying to make it out like they didn't see you, he did that. He saw me, and I feel like there was a trigger that went off in his head now with the context that I've got that I didn't have then, which is that
Mhm.
there has been that uneasy thing with his relationship to the hardest of the hardcore fans, the people who it almost seems there are people who think it's weird that people go out and hand paint tifos and make banners and do all this stuff. And I'm not putting words in his mouth, but
Mhm.
I think that based on the record, public comments that he has made about, I think we have a good relationship with most of the fans.
Mhm.
And people's tendency to yell at his family members, when they know who they are. As vocal as the Wolf Out stuff has been, I can comprehend and understand a reluctance to engage with someone who looks literally painted as maybe the kind of scary fan, maybe the fan who cares
Yeah.
so much, who spends so much free time as to make an art project that
Mhm.
they wear.
Right.
Not because I said anything to him. I said, great job, coach. Just that. And it was that kind of thing where he acted like he was already planning to turn around. He just didn't hear me. The music was still
Mhm.
booming, that kind of thing. I don't hold that personally against him myself at all. And it was just something that I noted that whenever that set in for him, whether it was during the first season or earlier in 2022 when the results weren't as
Mhm.
good at times, at a certain point, that reflexive reaction locked in for him. And whether properly vetting people or not, that's just the fight or flight response that he would have. And I think this isn't, I guess, a sort of apologism for him or defense of him necessarily, but I like to try to be as empathetic as I can with people, regardless of trying to dispassionately cover them as a journalist. And I feel like I understand that kind of fight or flight thing. He doesn't
Yeah.
have the Secret Service watching it for him. I get pressure getting to someone like that. And
Mhm.
I know that there are people who think
Yeah.
that that's a good thing. And yes, that's good. But yeah, I feel like there was always that kind of dividing line.
Yeah,
And
and it's interesting that you talk about it being in that moment because that is the game where they finally clinch playoffs after a rough patch that they had. And again, when I was talking about this yesterday when we did our emergency podcast recording, where I remember asking him about that after the game, that kind of decision to put Gite into that game in about what the 65th, 70th minute. And then
yeah,
he responds with 3 goals in 20 minutes. And Josh saw something in the matchup that made him realize, yes, this is going to be the move to make. And he made it and it worked beautifully. So here you have one of the best moments that he's ever had as a coach at Austin
yeah,
FC. And yet you're reporting in the glow of that, like immediately after that win and that celebration, that there is still that kind of guardedness, there is still that uneasiness, which is really interesting. And
he
again,
he's a young
I mean,
coach. He's a young coach.
sure, right.
And sitting there when Gite goes on, I remember the guy next to me going, "Oh, Gite," and boy was that guy wrong. And I
Yep,
turned to him and I
yep.
said, "Give him 15 minutes."
Uh, you knew, right?
And I felt it. I felt it. I am as big of a Zardes and Rigoni fan as people know that I am. I'm a much bigger
Right.
Musajite fan. Yeah, there are interesting notes like that to me about these
Mhm.
first 4 years of the story of the club, which are entirely the story of Josh Wolf's coaching career. And I believe that he has the capacity for growth. We saw it in different moments, as we referred to yesterday. So as much as Borrell saying things that seem like I have to say this and it's press release style. I've got to give appreciation to the coach.
Right.
I think there's a lot more texture and nuance to it than he could encapsulate, than he would encapsulate. Any answer that he gives or doesn't give, I feel like there are multiple layers to it. And that's borne out in the continued conversations that we've had with him. And I feel like we got yet more of that, despite the fact that some of our colleagues may feel that he has maybe gotten more guarded or is not as friendly to press as initially presented. That's not my impression at all. And frankly, I look forward to having my beach job as frequently as it ends up coming up.
Yeah, he seemed to say, and again, I haven't had the chance to listen to the entire thing yet at this stage of the evening, but I have listened to little parts while I was picking up kids. And yeah, his answer seemed to be, I have criteria and I'm not necessarily going to reveal those to you as of the present time. But yeah, like you had said, you think that when the coach gets announced, and I feel the same way, that he will make that criteria pretty evident. And that will be evident in the pick and in the things that he says about that candidate. And as you said, there was a little nugget that he dropped in about interest in this job, which I thought was pretty entertaining.
Yeah, at least 25 people have gotten in touch since yesterday morning when the news came out, volunteering themselves for this job vacancy. They would very much like to manage this Dunkin' Donuts, thanks. And frankly, that doesn't surprise me. What I enjoyed most about it was that it was in response to a question that phrased it as, what are you doing to attract coaches? And his answer very much came back as, I don't got to beg.
Being here.
Just
Look at
we're
the stadium.
here.
Look at these fans. Look at
And we got a
these
repeat.
kits.
We got a repeat of one of his catchphrases he was known for from his first solo press conference, where he said, "You wouldn't believe the names." The moment the word "names" left his lips, I knew how the sentence was going to end. And people have said, "Oh God, it sounds kind of Trumpy." There's also a Latin dad kind of vibe to it of I am a deal maker, and let me tell you, these deals, these options, oh, this juice I got, such juice, more juice than anybody else on the planet.
Yeah. And we've gotten that from him candidly too. Like we've gotten a little glimpse behind the curtain of the great job that he has done.
Yeah. Let me tell you how good I am on these deals with my business associates. Oh, forget about it. The jamon is salty, boys. Yeah. It just that confidence and poise is always fun. Other things that I was tweeting as we were going, I was dropping stuff in the Los Verdes Slack, keeping folks apprised. Danny Pereira was the one player with a club option or with an expiring contract who he did go on the record saying he'll be back next season. He will be at Austin, period. I mean, unless something happens, qualifying it with, the winter transfer. If somebody wants to spend $20 million on him, I doubt Burrell is going to say no to that. But there is nothing currently at play, he said, that would result in the reality being that Danny Pereira will be at Austin playing for Austin next season. And that he is.
However, if you are interested.
If you're interested, how big of a check you got? Bring out that checkbook. Let's see what's going on. That he's that firm and confident about what he sees as a post-rebuild season in 2025. That's what I felt like he was projecting more than anything, was projecting strength of the roster, of the players who are remaining, who he is deciding will remain. I asked him a follow-up late on mentioning Alex Ring, him doing journeyman work in the back line when the roster was short, carrying the captain's armband a lot this season, and acknowledging in asking it, look, you probably don't want to divulge more than what you did about Donnie, but what can you tell us about the timeline for those decisions being made? And he said that it'll be a bit longer than it was following the 2023 season, where a lot of those decisions were already very much finalized, very much figured out, ready to go, as we saw that news dropped right after decision day last year. Without committing to it might be a couple weeks or even a vague time frame, committing to it'll take a little longer. It inspires confidence. I think that there is a lot of precision going into the thought of why get rid of a player that we can make use of if it is going to then immediately cause the same roster depth issues. In the past, he said no more panic signings. I think that extends to making conscientious roster decisions going forward, where if bringing Alex Ring back on a 1-year club option contract, then it makes more sense to have that stability unless that roster spot is really that important. They already cleared the DP issue related to it. But if the
Yeah.
roster rules end up causing that logjam, unfortunate MLS math could be the reason that Alex Ring doesn't end up coming back next year.
We also don't know if there's an auto trigger as well, right? Because there was one last year. What's to say that there's not one for this year?
Precisely. And that's the thing is he was not going to get into that stuff, and that's
Right.
fine. But I think we did glean useful information in that
Mhm.
the delay will be entirely down to them making the absolute best decision they can, absolutely
Right.
in the time that they need to make it. And I don't think
Mhm.
that he's going to head into the off season wasting time for the sake of wasting time. I
Right.
feel like
Right.
even though we probably can't expect day after decisions to be made necessarily across the board, I'd be surprised if we get through the playoffs all the way and they still haven't made that. And
Mhm.
he also was
Right.
careful to say that the search process for finding the new coach was not going to impact that, that he pretty much already
Mhm.
knows what he wants to do, but that if the new coach is able to be brought in and incorporated before those decisions are finalized, then they will definitely have some input and be aware of it. But he is very much driving that train.
Yeah.
So
He
similar
is
to
doing what a sporting director should do.
yeah, the decision of what to do with Diego Fagundes, as much as he takes complete ownership for it publicly, timelines being what they were, it had to be something that was already in the works to some extent, or at least was identified as a roster budget issue and that kind of thing. I think we're looking at something similar here where he's, look, this is my job and we're not doing this backward kind of thing. I think there was some reassurance given to the fan base that people have
Mhm.
been worrying that, oh, Precourt's friends with Greg Berhalter. He's just going to hire Greg Berhalter and tell Roto that's who you're hiring. And I
No.
don't get that impression at all. My
No.
impression
No.
is that
No.
Anthony Precourt, who hates addressing the press when he can avoid it,
Yeah.
hates people doing jobs that they don't need to do, is a hedge fund type guy who wants to hire good people, the best people in the world, to do the best jobs in the world. And
Right.
I could not see Burrell accepting this gig if he were not calling all the shots. And that's the
Right.
biggest takeaway is Roto is
Yeah.
in charge, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, and Berhalter wants a dual role anyway, which I think he can get at the Fire
Yeah.
because those jobs are available and they're probably more willing to do that given their track record with their previous sporting director. But yeah, I don't think that suits Austin that well at all. Again, Barella's not going to necessarily want to share that job. I don't see that being the right fit. I don't see that happening at all. And again, yeah, just the whole question of is he gonna do something where he picks somebody with MLS experience? I know that you asked about that specifically,
Yeah.
and he said that could be a factor, but it also could not. So we'll kind of see. Oh, on the Fagundes thing, I wanted to mention that. Yeah, that was something where Burrell did take responsibility, but also noted that it was the Galaxy that came to Austin first. And again, Will Kuntz, who took over that job and had built LAFC in part by doing really good trades within the league, was beginning to exercise that a little bit. Again, that was a point where the Galaxy really needed to get just some players that were capable, especially on the wings. Of course, in the offseason, they got Peck and Paetzel, which is a definite upgrade from where they were. But I think Fagundes was a good acquisition. I think at that point, Burrell said, okay, we have this contract. This contract is not necessarily friendly. There's tensions here. All these
And also there
making that make sense.
There had been a pre-existing conversation that had been had that had cooled off, which he did acknowledge.
Right.
That there was a
Right.
conversation that happened well prior to him,
Yeah.
interest from the team, and then the interest
Mhm.
woke back up. And the way
Right.
he characterized it was the easiest, great, let's make this big move. One of the things, and this relates to some of the stuff that he got into in Spanish a bit and a little bit in English, but I
Mhm.
think the earliest he really dug into it was really committing to saying that he wants the club to improve, to be better, but every club wants to do that. And the roster rules are the roster rules, and who's available in what windows is
Mhm.
not, there is not everything on the market that he could possibly want every window. And so rather than begging patience, he advised patience for, look, this is going to take more
Mhm.
time. It's going to take several transfer windows across a number of seasons to get where he wants them to be. So this is not the kind of thing that at the beginning of 2025, the project is going to be set. But I
Mhm.
feel like he was counseling patience on the back of what everybody's seen over the last 14 months, which has been,
Yeah.
I got to say, really impressive. It has been very not cautious to a fault, but cautious and pragmatic with an eye to making the strongest upgrade moves possible with the resources, and it doesn't seem like Precourt is cutting off the checkbook. That's why they're selling minority stake stuff to generate some cash. That is investing in the club. That is hedge funder for, we are investing. We are not trying to skimp. We are not doing this as a tax write-off. We are committed to improving the club. So now,
and maybe
Jamie is-
preemptively, we're gonna have to pay a striker. We're gonna have to pay a new coach.
yeah, and of course,
It's interesting now thinking about the timing of when that announcement came and then when this announcement came.
Yeah,
you had mentioned a couple of other players too that Burrell had talked about specifically in response to questions. We should cover that too, just because people are probably wondering who is back and who is not back.
Let's start with Seba Driussi. Driussi was brought up and totally straight-faced, deadpan as all hell. He said Driussi's under contract. Why would he not be back? Have you heard something I haven't? Maybe on Twitter? It was great. It was classic. It was really solid. I like, poking fun at something, with a new coach changes dynamics. We saw former players post things in their Instagram stories that was definitely subtextual and in one case very covertly textual, not subtextual.
But I'm sure that's going to be consideration for the new coach too. It's okay. You have this talented player who has gone from 22 goals to 11 goals to 6 goals in the span of 2 seasons. What are you going to do to get that guy back?
This is where Roto made mention of, I think he's been great in these last 2 games. And to me, the way that I subtextually read that is the reference to these last 2 games. Something changed these last 2 games. A certain decision was definitely final. And these last 2 games, the way that this team has played has been better than they have otherwise in the season. I don't know that the players got some sort of like advance heads up of, hey, Josh is on the way out, but I feel like Borrell exerted the influence of, let's see these players play to what they're capable of, not to what they're being limited to. That's what that feels like to me. And I feel like them timing this before decision day was in the interest of showing these players, some of them departing, some of them who will be on the market and available for transfer, and the people who are still here for the best that they are, which I think is the best way to put the club on a better footing. And I think directly addressing that, Driussi he's not requested to be transferred. Said that on the record. So there it is. Let there be less mystery about that kind of thing. Who else came up in the mix? I
Owen
mentioned
Wolff came
Alex
up
a minute ago. Oh, Owen Wolff. Owen Wolff? Huh. Gee, I wonder why Owen Wolff would come up. Our friend Eric Goodman, second to last, because Gavin's still in the academy, as far as we know.
That's true.
Owen Wolff was brought up, and Roto directly answered that it was asked whether Owen's future at the club was at all impacted by Josh getting fired, and Roto said absolutely not, and went on to praise him in that answer, and then praise him in a follow-up answer of another question asked a little bit later, really praising how outstanding and just overall impressive he finds Owen Wolff. Called him one of the most promising young players in the league. And later he admitted to, when he took the job, looking at that dynamic of coach and his son on the same team, and he was uncertain as to how that was going to work out. And he has ended up over these 14 months being very impressed with Owen Wolff and has no intention of offloading him. But again, if one of those $20 million checks ends up coming through, their word for Danny, he still has not ruled out. He has never said such and such player is not available for sale at any price. He has stuck by everybody's for sale.
Yeah, this could be really good for Owen, though. Again, just to show his versatility, to continue to develop and have a new voice, have new input. Because again, obviously, your coach is your father. This is the voice that you're hearing. A lot of what you know about soccer comes from this one person. And to be able to, at this point in his career, to have guidance from somebody else, I think is only going to be valuable for him, provided that relationship is good.
Yeah. And I think that one of the biggest things, it's not just turning a page with a new coach, it's that there are so many things that have become recurring things to be relitigated and relitigated and relitigated. Is it the roster? Is it the coach? The roster has an opportunity to show itself for what they are capable of outside of this coach's rigid system, which previous players have definitely indicated was not something that they were having trouble with because they were like protest playing badly or something. And that's never been my impression, that these guys want to look bad so that their market value tanks. I've never understood that as a motivation for these players. And I think that Owen in particular is a great example of getting out from under things that people keep bringing up of, oh, his dad's the coach and that's the only reason he's getting played. He's incredibly versatile. He's incredibly capable. This is something I also say about John Gallagher. I think John Gallagher is,
Yeah.
he's incredibly fit. He is incredibly capable, and having to bounce all over the field, covering things in a very rigid, very regimented version of total football,
Yeah.
the totalist of football, one might say,
Yeah.
that it wears out the fittest of the fit players in their prime.
Right.
Maybe it really is and has been the system. Let's see what
Yeah.
these
And
guys
again,
look like outside the system.
yeah, I mean, I remember talking to Gallagher at Coachella, like at the start of this year, and he was talking about the emphasis on defense, that they were doing more of a focus on that when he didn't necessarily have the freedom to get forward like he did in 23. In 23, he got forward and he was an all-star. In 24, he was, yeah, deployed in a lot of different positions and just made to run, and he's willing to do that. But maybe that's not the smartest deployment. Maybe a new coach comes in, sees what he's good at, figures out a way where they're not going to be defensively bereft, but they're also not going to be offensively inept, and they're going to find some kind of balance between the two, and lo and behold, become a complete soccer team.
Yeah. Everything along these lines that we got today, which really was the whole thing, it inspired all the confidence that I think a lot of people have been looking for. Speaking for myself, certainly for me.
Yeah.
And I think that as much as people may not like him being evasive and wanting him to just answer the questions, or he's not on trial, but what he is willing to reveal, whether directly or indirectly in the way that he talks about things, make it so that you don't have to layer a bunch of fan fiction level interpretation onto what he's doing, what he's said he was going to do. And it was a mystery Sunday morning as to who the interim coach was going to be. We were told that they would be named in due time. And as I was finishing my opening two questions, I just tossed off, timeline for naming an interim coach. And he looked at me like it was the most, don't you know this? He was, it's Davey Arnaud. And
makes total sense. Like,
yeah,
that's what I thought it was going to be. Like, why would it not be?
Why dance around with it? And when asked how the firing actually went down, Josh was summoned to the stadium on Sunday morning for a meeting with him and Anthony Precourt, and that he was sad and he was certainly upset, but he understood the decision and took it and accepted it. And that then staff and players were all notified by text. The players had just gotten back at 5 a.m. from Carson, which is not LA, but it is Carson, California, while we're doing California geography.
I wonder if they flew into Long Beach than rather LAX.
Oh man. So there's a commute and a plane. Yikes. That's no fun.
But Long Beach isn't as bad as LAX. Like, depending on traffic, there's probably not traffic at the time where they were there, but Southern California geography.
So the staff and players are back in the middle of the night or the very early morning, depending on how you look at it. Middle of the night, LA time, early morning, Austin time. And the reason for not calling everybody personally was A, there was not time, and B, everybody was exhausted. Why wake them up when they're trying
probably
to
sleep? They're probably like waking up to those texts middle of the afternoon. If Horkiam Kubik, though, who had to got home at 5:15, had to get up at 8 again and write some press releases, and then was at the Verdos game. God bless him.
Yeah, our friend, in the most unbiased way I can use that term, the director of communications for the club, one of the hardest working men in show business. It should go. It should go without saying. But I'm
sometimes it is really tough to work in sports. So respect to Cam for putting the literal and the figurative and the emotional work that all goes into such a weird transition.
That was what happened. The notice went out to everybody, and then it was very quickly announced publicly right after that to avoid leaks or it coming from somewhere else. I think that they got it done as early as they could to not overshadow the fact that their other team playing that afternoon, that it could overshadow that as little as it could without it completely taking over the entire day, even though it did take over the entire day. I respect them, unfortunately, getting people out of bed early to get something like that out there. That is a certain amount of consideration that I think is good. And he also, when pressed, said that the decision to fire Josh would not have happened um, prior to the team being mathematically eliminated from the playoffs.
Right,
That
right.
they
Which took a while, but
took
yeah,
a
yeah.
while. So yeah, there a lot of that kind
Mhm,
of really by the numbers. Here's the
mhm.
TikTok, not the
Yeah,
short
yeah,
form video, but this is the rundown of how things went. Fan base, this audience needs that to an extent because so much is
right.
always shrouded in mystery in this mystery box of a
Yeah.
club. Which welcome to sports.
And judging from the crowd at Parmer, the Wolf news did not necessarily dampen the mood
No,
of
I feel like there were a fair number of people who maybe came out who were on the fence as to whether they were going to come out.
mm,
There was very much an atmosphere of relief, of
mhm,
catharsis, of
yeah,
this is the next step. There were people who were definitely it was the 4th of July, but in general, I think that the reaction from the fan base across the board that I can safely put on everybody is finally we get to turn the page. Finally, we
yeah,
get to leave certain things in the past. Finally, we get a reset on certain things. Finally, we
mhm,
get
yeah, yeah,
this
yeah,
opportunity to
yeah,
continue to grow as a club because, as Burrell has said, this is a very young club. This is
mhm.
a very young fan base.
Yeah, and I think reset's important because again, that's oftentimes what these coaching moves do, but sometimes they're strange how they come about and all that. Just that this was expected and we had this kind of build up to it and knew and predicted and that I could pre-write a story like a couple weeks before, knowing that
Hmm.
yeah, this is gonna come in handy. This is something that this is probably not wasted effort. Yeah. So before we wrap up, anything else that jumps out from
I'm fond of bringing up MLS Next Pro and Austin FC2 whenever I have the chance. It seems like nobody else
yeah.
does.
It was a great game until it was not a great game.
Yeah, but I brought up the second team, asked him for
Hmm.
feedback on the job that he feels Brett Utley has done over the last couple of
Hmm.
seasons, knowing that roster is in a rebuild phase. And
Yeah.
Burrell said one of the things that I identified at the beginning was that was an old roster. We don't need 25 and 26-year-olds on that team. That needs to be
Yeah.
younger players. It needs to be younger players and it needs to be
Right.
rebuilt. And so he acknowledged that
Yeah.
that is a process that definitely impacted that team's
Yeah.
roster
Right.
and chances. But
Yeah.
then he went on a tear about the PK shootouts after draws, which he is
Uh-huh.
vocally not a fan of.
Yeah.
And to me, hey, they exist and it's a developmental league and they try out rules there that MLS is looking to maybe institute in the top flight league. And Burrell was
To annoy you on a regular basis.
he was in no way unclear in saying no other league in the world does this.
Right.
This directly impacts player fatigue. They have just gotten finished playing an entire game, and then you have them do a PK shootout on a
Mhm.
very frequent basis over the course of a season. And
Right.
I've got to say, regardless of how one feels about the showbiz aspect of putting on a show that,
Mhm.
you get the drama of a PK shootout, I really appreciate the sporting director of a club getting out there, getting the backs of players who are playing more congested schedules, even in third division MLS Next Pro, than many other leagues across the world, and going, look, these guys are exhausted, and this isn't even getting into the way that it affects standings and tables. And that gave me a new math project to do that I've added to my
Yeah.
list of I'm gonna redo the entire MLS Next Pro table and look at how it would have
Nice.
turned out
Nice, nice. Yeah.
without second points from draw wins.
I
Um,
love it.
and let's see what the
Mhm.
story of the 2024 season would have been differently if that had
Mhm.
been the case. And yeah, I appreciate him, saying something, about the job that Utley has done. Mauricio Pochettino and his men's national team staff were all there, stayed for the whole
Yeah.
game, made a
Yeah.
point to come down to say hello to the players, give them words of encouragement following a bruising come from ahead loss that they had gone through, and made a point, Poach did, of talking to Brett, shaking
Mhm.
Jimmy Farcarlin's hand. And that's a kind of class that I am happy that Austin's local club is playing host to that atmosphere coming to the U.S. men's national team.
Yeah. That former Spurs coach is okay. Yeah.
Yeah, on every other day or so. I don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I wanted to say about the PK thing. So, yeah, I do understand it. Him being a purist. Yeah, absolutely. I understand. But also, sir, this is a Major League Soccer. Have you not seen the glorious P 1.0 shootouts where they ran up from 35 yards? It could be a lot wackier.
Look,
Um,
it's better
maybe
than
a
doing goalie
countdown
wars.
clock. Hello. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, no, no way, man.
goalie wars, endurance challenges. Go full extreme sports. Put the X in MLS.
Yeah. You'll just settle it with the skills challenge at the end.
Yeah, Major League Soccer with an X, MLX. That's the way that you know that MLS has
Oh,
gone
God.
extreme.
Wow. Wow. Very 90s. Okay. It started in the 90s, so it stands to reason. All right. Anything else before we take off?
No, man, I think that's about it. It's been a long weekend
Yeah, tell me.
for the folks working for the club, and I told you that I had trouble sleeping Saturday night into Sunday, and it wasn't
Yeah.
I wasn't. I think the term is surus. Like I wasn't conflicted. I wasn't incredibly anxious or something like that out of like personal worry for somebody else, but it just we have been on that knife's edge to your point
Mhm.
for a couple of weeks such that you could pre-write certain things, and it was just
Yeah.
that feeling of is the dam going to break, and boy has the dam
Mhm.
broken over the last 2
Yeah.
days, and what a
Yeah.
difference 48 hours makes.
Yeah. See, I expected the announcement today. I did not expect it Sunday.
So did I.
Again, given coming back from West Coast trip, I figured day to decompress, let Veritas have their day. What's done is done. And again, it's probably, again, it's that reset, that feeling of relief, the kind of closure that Roto brought today. I think it's, again, it was time, and it's now time to look to the future and see who this new coach is going to be and how this new team's going to be remade for 25.
Yeah, I feel like the decision to not waste a work day on a work week Monday, no time like the present to move things forward when the decision was already basically done a couple weeks ago and just in need of that final dam to break.
Yeah, and everybody can sleep October 20th because there's not going to be playoffs to worry about.
Yeah, that's all I got.
All right. Okay, we'll wrap it up. We have no snazzy outro yet, but if you have ideas, if you want to record something, send it our way. Let us know.
Yeah, if you have thoughts, please. We're adrift until we find that new outro cue. I don't. We'll kick some ideas around. We will have a pathway, if not a final selection made. I'm not committing to a timeline, but I feel confident that Phil and I will have a series of principles agreed upon when next we record.
Maybe in 2 days we'll have 25 candidates.
It's at least the names, such names.